It's so good to be here with you this morning. Life happens, does it not? Oftentimes, it seems that life takes us down a path that we never dreamed we would be on. And I don't know about you, but my life looks so much more like chaos than a steady rhythm. I have 4 kids. Anybody else here have 4 or more kids?
Dogs.
Comedian Jim Gaffigan says, do you know what it's like to have a 4th kid? It's like drowning and somebody hands you a baby. All this is going to make you do is flail around and go to the bottom of the ocean faster. At one point, my kids were 3 under 3. And I think the first time we went to the grocery store, it took us 3 hours just to get out of the door. Just as we're putting the vehicle in drive, we realize we still got a munchkin at the table eating Cheerios. What are we going to do? But not only is home life and family life full of chaos, work can be crazy as well. So I have a confession. I snuck into one of your offices this week and I took a picture of your desk. So if this is you, I'm not going to turn you in. But the good news is those French fries will still taste the same a year from now, okay? And if this is you, then this is also you Friday at 5 o'clock. You say, get me out of here. This is a zoo. So not only can family life get chaotic, and work life get chaotic, am I not right? Sometimes, on a more somber note, large-scale stuff enters our life and creates crazy chaos. It might be the devastation of a tsunami that just wreaks total chaos in our world. It might be a hurricane in our own country, or hatred and fighting, misunderstandings that lead to a crisis of over 65 million refugees, large-scale chaos in our world today. And in the midst of it, human beings, we try to enter into the chaos of life and make sense of it. In some way, we try to look at this and ask the question of how do we live in such a crazy world? What is our response to be? Well, I think that direction determines destination. Okay, I'll say it again. So direction determines destination. And if you want to know if you are heading towards the destination that is going to bring you and those around you in your circle of influence the most amount of life, you have to look at the direction you're heading, not the one you planned on going as a kid or the degree you got in college. Who actually has a career in the degree you got in college? Very few, because life is crazy. You have to look right now at the current direction you are on. So I'd love to hand you some rhythms that will allow you to hit the pause button. Periodically, hit the pause button in life and allow you to look, recalibrate, and see if the direction you are heading on leads to the destination that will bring you life. Not long ago, I was coaching a gentleman, and he kept talking about having to hit the reset button. Now, the reset button is very different than the pause button. The reset button is a total life change. See, he had got so busy making a living, he forgot to make a life. He needed a new job, a new home, a new circle of friends. And while that was an excellent decision for him, what if we were people that hit the pause button? We would stop, review where we are in the midst of the most intense chaos. We would grow. Because unless we continually recalibrate our direction, our destination, it will be chosen for us. About 5 years ago, somebody asked me the question, hey Chad, how's it going? How have things been lately? Pretty normal question, right? I didn't know how to answer. It was the middle of the winter, and I thought back through the first part of the winter. I thought back through the fall. Well, my wife had a birthday, there was some holidays. I didn't really have a clear answer because my life was full of such chaos. And I wanted to be able to give him a clear answer. The problem with my chaos was it was not imitatable. Think about a crazy CEO, a boss, somebody whose life is hectic. right? How can you follow them? You can't, right? It's like they don't even know themselves, much less you get to know them. So we want to live a life worth imitating. And I think one of the best ways to go about that is to just simply give people access to who you are. Anybody here perfect? Okay. Oh, all right, well, a couple people. Meet up with them afterwards. Right. We're not perfect. We're not inviting people into our perfect lives. We're just inviting people to have access to who we are. Abraham Lincoln understood this in a great way. He would often say, I've got to get out of the White House and circulate among the troops. And in 1861, he did just that. He was outside the White House more than he was in. And they say he possibly met every enlisted Union soldier. Wow, that is amazing. He gave people deep access to his life, to who he was. And so they could imitate. What does it look like for him to value human beings? Because Abraham Lincoln did not see them as human doings. He saw them as human beings. These were not like wheels in a cog trying to accomplish some greater goal. These were men who had families and wives and moms and dads back home, and he wanted to value them. So picture this. It's a pendulum. It swings in life in a rhythm between being and doing. Okay, we're human beings, we're human doings. It swings between rest and work. So there's no judgment, but I am going to ask you to raise your hand, because there's not a good spot, there's not a bad spot. It's a rhythm. Okay? But I'd love to see, are you on the being, on the rest side of the pendulum? Right now. Not where would you like to be or where were you. Right now, in this moment, in your season of life, and within this 2-week period of life. Are you in the being, or have you swung over here to the doing? Okay, so all my beings and my rest people, hands up. Great. 10 of you. Okay, all my doing people, my work. There it is. That's right. Thank you so much. So there's no judgment, okay? But here's the next question. And I'll just let the needle prick where it wants. And it's this. How long have you been there? Yeah, that's the question. How long have you been there? Are you stuck? Is that pendulum stuck? And how we move and swing this thing is very intentional. Sometimes life swings it for us, but we don't have to stay there, right? That's great news. We don't have to stay there. So if you're on the doing side of life, then what you need to do is called pruning. You need to say no. N-O. Repeat after me. No. No. Now you got to say no to some stuff, right? Because every time we say yes to something, we say no to something else. So I want you to say yes to rhythm and no to chaos. And so what we're going to do is you're going to prune, you're going to cut back. So I'm no horticulturalist, but I took and whacked my roses down to like no higher than my boot back in January. And right now they're this tall and they're about to bloom a ton of beautiful yellow roses. But it's only because I pruned and I cut it back that it can then swing towards growth. And so we're human beings, right? We're created for rhythms of silence and noise, for solitude and community. You get the idea. Rest, work, being, doing. So what would it look like for you to swing that pendulum, right? So I'd like to share with you these 4 simple rhythms. But before you get overwhelmed, it's not a big thing. It's simple. It's not about additional. Who has time to add more? You're a bunch of human doings. You don't have time for more, right? It's through intentional, not additional, where we find life. So American philosopher John Dewey, he says, we do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on that experience. Okay? Confucius says we learn wisdom by 3 ways. First, by reflection. Second, by imitation. Remember Abraham Lincoln? Third, by experience. So, for my wife and I, what we do is we take every Sunday night, we set it aside for a nice glass of wine. Sometimes it's $3 chucks, but you know. And we look back at our highs and lows just in the past week. That's it. We don't really go much back further than that. Highs and lows. We look forward into our hopes and our fears. We just have a conversation around it. It's a neutral space. We're relaxed. We can talk about some of the stress points in our relationship from the past week with our 4 crazy munchkins, whatever needs to come up. We just allow the conversation to come up. We reflect on it, and we try to grow. One more quote. The CEO of LinkedIn says, celebrate success. Reflect on your failure, and move on. Move on. All right, so here we go. When you're looking at your highs from the past week, what you're doing is you are celebrating. Yeah, you're celebrating your highs. Celebration is so important. If you want to know what a culture values, then you start by looking at what they celebrate. Look at the arts, the music. Who are the people of the day that are popular? What are they like? What are their lives like? That gives you a taste for this culture and what it is like. I could mention a bunch of nations or areas in the country. I mentioned New Orleans. You'd think, oh, okay, Mardi Gras, you know. And so you start looking and you see what a culture values. Well, we're no different. If you want to know what you value, what do you celebrate? You celebrate people, or you celebrate projects? Because oftentimes, at least in the work business world, we're celebrating these projects and we forget that the people are the one that got us there. People are the one that accomplished this, right? Every Friday night at my house is Friday family night. So that was last night. And guys, it's my favorite time of the week. It is so awesome. My wife makes this, you should just come over sometime. My wife makes this pizza, homemade crust, okay? And she takes like a whole stick of butter and just rubs it on the pieces are square. She rubs it on the crust. And she takes this garlic salt, and it's just, oh man, it's so amazing. And we just have homemade pizza, and we watch a movie, we go play disc golf, whatever. But it's this normal rhythm we've built in. My oldest kid's now 12, and he's turned down going out to the cool kid's house to hang out on a Friday night to stay home for Friday family night. Why? Because we just take just a short minute to talk about them, celebrate them, let them know they are deeply loved, deeply treasured, and valued in our home. No matter how wild they've been that week, they know they are secure in our home. We want to celebrate them and them to know they are deeply, deeply valued. We also want to reflect on our lows. It's like, oh, why do we have to go there? Reflect on our lows. Well, some lows are outside of our choice, right? It's the giant tsunami that enters our world. It's the demotion at work. It's something that we had nothing to do with. But we want to learn from these, right? We don't want them to enter in and cause us to be grumpy, old, bitter people. So some are out of our control, some are within our control, and we're just a bunch of bumbling fools. We make a stupid decision, now we have to live in the consequence. So instead of like, well, suck it up, deal with it, it's like, okay, how can I learn from this? How can I grow? Because we want failure to be a stepping stone to deeper character and competency in us as people, not a stumbling block that causes us to trip and fall flat on our face. Pretty easy. Celebrate highs, reflect on lows. What would your workplace look like if you're a leader, or maybe you're not a leader in your workplace? You're just another regular employee there, but you were intentional to start implementing this. What if the end of a work week on Friday took 10 minutes? I'd take 10 minutes, and we are going to spend 5 looking at the past week of work, highs, lows. Spend 5 looking at this next week, get a plan, hopes, fears. It's a free space for people to talk. I think often our hopes and our fears are like a balloon and a string. Okay? Hope is awesome and it's beautiful. It's this balloon that goes up high, and string, the fear, ties it down. And the two work together really, really well. Unless you're this idiot at Disney that ruins this beautiful princess's little day, and he says no, and he cuts the string. Oftentimes, I think that's what we do. We either say the balloon says to the string, you're just a stick in the mud. Or the string says to the balloon, you have your head in the clouds. Right? So we want to acknowledge our hopes. They say that the youth grab hold of the future. The middle age They just hang on to what they have. And the old, they're hanging on to the past. Why does hope wane? Because it's a chaotic world. We want to be people that speak hope, words of hope, with such clarity, it's as if we were describing the past as it has happened. Don't be afraid to talk about your hopes that you have, as small as it might even seem in the next week. And maybe, if you put words to it, when you evaluate the next and you're living in rhythm, you're like, hey, that was a high from the last week. I'm so glad I was hopeful for that. We also have fears. And some fears are legitimate, some fears are not legitimate. How do we know the difference? We have to name them. If we don't name our fear, it will take authority over us. When you name it, then you take authority over your fear. Put words to it. This is brave, brave stuff. Enter into it with a space with somebody you trust. I have a couple friends a couple years ago. They were in Idaho, snowy walk, middle of the winter. They came to a lake, and the lake was frozen, and they said, let's do this. And they walked out, and they were about 15 minutes out into the lake at this point. Then they heard, wah! Come flying around the corner was a sea-doo pulling a bunch of kids on 2 tubes, bouncing into each other. They had no idea that the lake was totally safe, or those guys were totally idiots. But they kind of smacked each other on the shoulders and were like, we could have enjoyed ourselves, nothing to fear. But they didn't know if it was legitimate fear or not, because they hadn't been able to really name it. Let me leave you with this. Every time you say yes to something, you say no to something else. Say yes to rhythm and no to chaos. Have a good Christmas.